Hi, I'm Brandon Poe, founder of Poe Group Advisors and creator of the Accounting Practice Academy. You are listening to the Accountant's Flight Plan podcast, where we talk about stuff in the accounting world. If you're looking to buy or sell a practice, we are the premier accounting practice intermediary firm in the industry. Check us out at pogroupadvisors.com. If you're a firm owner looking to build a more profitable practice while actually reducing owner hours, sign up for our practice management workshop, which only runs a few times per year. Learn more at accountingpracticeacademy.com. Welcome to the Accountant's Flight Plan podcast. I'm very excited to introduce a special guest, Gina Pellegrini. Hello, Gina.
Hello. How are you?
Great. Thank you for coming on. Gina is a coach for Strategic Coach, and I've been a member of Strategic Coach for over 10 years now. Her company is Pellegrini Team Consulting, and she's been in the financial services industry for over 40 years.
I started at age 7.
That's right. So you worked with a financial producer for 17 years, and you were helping with administrative scheduling to work to keep his calendar full and manage the office day to day. And then in 1992, you saw an opportunity. And so you started your own company, and you help financial advisors hire, train, and work better with their teams. And so primarily now your business focuses on scheduling, primarily in the financial advisor space, right?
Correct.
And one thing we've done, so for Accounting Practice Academy, we decided to share, what's the name of the book? The Hiring Advantage.
The Hiring Advantage.
So that's actually one of the tools that we give away to members of Academy. So I asked Gina to come on and talk about hiring, because it's one of the biggest things that we hear about as being a potential growth obstacle for CPA firm owners. So I really am glad you're here, and we can't wait to unpack what you've got planned for us today. So, well, I'd like to start just, we gave you some basic background, but tell us a little bit about yourself personally, and how you kind of got into what you're doing a little bit more. And
so I originally grew up in Chicago. And when I first started working with a financial advisor, I had a couple of jobs before that. And I loved working with, I'm just going to call it more an entrepreneur, that you could really help somebody grow their business. He just happened to be a financial advisor. And I worked with him for 17 years. And this really ties into hiring. One of the, I guess, 3 of the main reasons that I stayed with him as long as I did is he didn't micromanage me. In fact, I had to learn to be resourceful versus having somebody that I went to ask questions with that it gave me all the answers. So being resourceful was one thing, because he didn't micromanage. Secondly, I was really engaged with the clients and the prospects and the referrals that we got. And then the third thing is my compensation grew based on the value that I brought for the business. However, I moved to Minnesota in 94, and I had already started my own business because I saw that there was a niche to help people in the interviewing process. So I continued working with financial advisors, but I just saw that they were really struggling. They didn't know what they were looking for, how to find that person. So when I first started the business, I did a lot of hiring, training, communication, and then it morphed into a lot of hiring. And now we're doing scheduling. And what scheduling means, if a financial advisor has someone in their office that's making their appointments, just like CPAs, like they need to have appointments scheduled, but they also need that personable, friendly, and outgoing individual to be persistent and consistent in making those appointments. So we train someone in the office, or we do the scheduling for them.
Nice. Yeah. It's, and I could tell you, as in my business, like that scheduler is so crucial. In our business is transactional, right? So we're we don't get to keep our clients. I mean, you sell your business once usually. So, for us, like keeping the scheduler is the kind of drives the whole pipeline for new business.
Absolutely.
And
it doesn't matter what business it is. If you're any kind of an entrepreneur, you need someone to schedule and manage your calendar. And if somebody can do that for you, it just frees up your time.
yeah. So do you teach people how to like manage the calendar as well? Is that part of the schedulers?
In the training series that we have, a lot of it is language and role playing and just understanding how to overcome the no's that you might get for whatever reason that you're scheduling. But it's also systems to work the client base and how to leave a voicemail, when to call back. It's got all different types of bits and pieces in it, including scripting. So again, it doesn't matter if it's a CPA firm, a financial advisor, like Ace Hardware, like it just has to have somebody controlling and managing time.
Right. And that's why we give your book away, because it's so, I know you have a focus in financial advisors, but it's so relevant to anybody in a service business, I would think. So, it's good.
And
so
I
let's
think
talk.
I think the book is applicable because there's 3 steps to the process. And the one thing that I would say is most people don't have a process at all. And if they could have a process, because if you continue to grow, you're going to hire more people. So when you have a step-by-step process, you might veer away from a little bit depending on the scenario. But if you have a process, you're just going to be that much more successful at finding the right people for the team.
Yeah. And finding is key, right? Like it's attracting the right candidates. I found your book interesting on that, is like you want to have the language to attract the right people. And then, of course, the interviewing process is a big part of that. Let's talk about that for a minute. Like, what are the pitfalls you see people make when interviewing?
One, they're not crystal clear what they want. And in order to craft an ad and or find someone to fit that position, you need to be really clear as to what the job description is, the specifics of the role. And then secondly, another pitfall is they rush through the process. Looks good, sounds good, let's just go with it.
Yeah.
And I think that happens with a lot of entrepreneurs because their unique ability, if you will, using a strategic coach term, is not hiring or interviewing and or even training. So even if someone else is in your office, that firm owner needs to get out of their head exactly what they need. And then I think the last thing is, again, going back to process. They don't have a consistent process. It's just like, let's post an ad, let's get people in here, let's train them on X. So if there's just the flow, and again, going back to the hiring advantage, there's a flow to the process, again, they can be much more successful.
Yeah. Yeah, we did that in our firm. We developed a process, and I learned like I need to be, as the owner, like the last in line.
Perfect.
Like let them filter through the rest of the team and let my team kind of do that filtering, and then bring me the candidates that I really need to look at closely.
Perfect.
Now, what about compensation? How do you determine a good compensation and benefit package for people, and how do you help owners do that?
So it's a great question, and it's so hard to answer from the standpoint that regardless of where somebody is across the country, you might think, oh, they live in California, it's got to be higher, or Kansas City, it's lower. And it really is the position, but more so, what would you like to bring somebody in at? So I first, as the business owner, need to be clear about what's my range. And let's just throw out a number of $40,000 range. The second thing is when I'm interviewing people, and I think first before you interview them, it's pre-screening, but when you're asking the question of what income range you're looking for, meaning the candidate you're asking, And then, they're anywhere from 38 to 65, but it gives you a little bit more of a framework. There's also different positions that you could go online and search, and it gives you the average, but it doesn't always take into account geographics, the size of your office, the success of your office. But I just think that if you're clear about an income range that you want, and then that's your ballpark. And then when you're asking that question, you're going to get a better framework. So if I thought 40 in the very beginning, it might be more the average of 55. However, if I was thinking 40 and I bring somebody in at 55 and they're doing the job, they're worth that extra money, because if I'm not paying it out, I'm doing the work. Mm-hmm. And therefore, they're going to cost me that anyway. So I think the third part to the income is, don't be stingy, like really look at this person freeing you up. That's what they're there to do, or freeing somebody on the team up, so that, again, the company can grow. Yeah. And then as far as benefits, I'm just a firm believer that people do need individual health insurance. And I know that there's so many different plans out there now, but I like knowing that the people that work with me have some kind of benefits. And then even vacation time, people are afraid to state you get this amount of time off, but the average is 1 week after 6 months and 2 weeks after a year. We do ours after somebody's been here for 3 months, and we combine ours. It's sick time, vacation time, whatever you want to call it. It's just your personal time off. And, it grows. Usually after a year, it stays 2 weeks, and then people up that after 3 years. That's kind of the average.
Okay. I've noticed, and I could be way off, but some of the best people I've ever worked for before I owned my own company, and just some of the best business owners I've seen, they have this philosophy, like it's better to overpay and get very high quality people than to underpay and then have high turnover. And what do you think about the turnover? Like how much does turnover really cost? Because I think turnover is probably a lot more expensive than people imagine that it is.
So I'm going to start with overpaying because you have that quality person. However, I'm cautiously wanting to overpay. And I say cautiously because if, let's just say again, my price range is 40 and somebody's at 65, but they're a gem, it appears. How do we know they're really a gem? So part of what I might do is say, I'm going to bring you in at this. And then when you get to this level, and it could be a growth grid over a year's period of time, or it could be after 3 months, it could be after 30 days. But I like someone showing me their worth versus me having this expectation that I went from 40 to 65 and they're going to be jumping through hoops and they're there the first day and they're not doing their job.
Right.
With that said, if I'm thinking 40 and, I got somebody that I interviewed and they say, oh, I'm looking for 32. Oh, good. I'm going to bring in this person because they're cheaper. I don't know that it's really the salary range as much as the clarity of what you want someone to do, the expectations of their position, and most importantly, the accountability to what they're required to do. And then I think their revenue can grow just like yours can.
Interesting about accountability. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, because that's the one thing that I think is lacking in a lot of offices. And it goes back to usually the entrepreneur doesn't really want to get into the weeds or the nitty gritty. However, if you have somebody that's brand new and you're clear about your expectations, and on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and maybe even on a quarterly basis, if there's no accountability, I could go, let's say I'm your new employee, I could go 1 week, 2 weeks, 2 months, and you're not happy with what I'm doing. I'm unaware of it. And we've never discussed it. However, if you say, Gina, here are your 3 main responsibilities, I'll use that as an example. And at the end of every week, you or someone else on the team is touching base and really making sure that they're doing. So then in week 2, if they're not doing what they need to be doing, there's more accountability. They know that there's going to be somebody reviewing it at the end of each week.
Mm-hmm.
It could be at the end of 2 months or 3 months, you don't have to do that anymore because they got it.
Right.
But I think early on, everybody needs accountability.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned those 3 things, and we do that. So we have a weekly Zoom meeting because my team's all over the place.
Right.
And everybody that's on that meeting declares their 3 results that they want to get. I write those down. The next week, we review those 3. And not only does it keep everybody accountable, not just to me, but to the whole team.
Correct.
And you know what's going on in the team. So,
and you don't want to be the person that shows up for that meeting and not do what you were expecting to do in the week.
Yeah.
You know, everybody else can say, yay, I did my 3 things or whatever it might be. And then Gina comes in and she doesn't have anything to be accountable to. She didn't do her. No one wants to do that.
Right.
So that in itself is going to bring even a stronger accountability to the whole team.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. What about finding candidates like that? Because that's so important, especially like I said, it's one of the biggest complaints I hear from CPA firm owners all the time. Is like, it's so hard to find good CPAs and tax preparers and bookkeepers and so forth. And so what are, I think you have 3 pointers that kind of stand out about posting ads to get people in. What are those 3 pointers that people can use for their next hire?
So I'm very transparent, and I believe that if you state exactly what you want that person to do, you're going to find more of those individuals. Because if you put a lot of fluff in an ad, even about the company, you're not really getting down to the basics. So you can get a ton of candidates. Not to say that people really read ads these days. They usually go by keywords. But, you know, I like crafting the position and even talking about some of the characteristics that you're looking for in that person and why that's important. And then if you post it on LinkedIn, just think about your network. Even though you might not, for me, even though it might not be somebody that I'm connected with in Minnesota, they live in California, but they know somebody in Minnesota. So I think LinkedIn is a great place. You can post an ad, but you can also just put it on your page. And then, of course, there's Indeed, which has wiped out a lot of the other options. And then there's Better Team. It's all one word, better, BETTERTEAM.com. And I'm also one that, especially, let's just take a CPA firm owner. They have tons of people that they know, clients that they know, and crafting that ad in an email and sending it out, and or your vendors. Like vendors is another crucial, like they know you, they know your business, and it might not be somebody that's in their business, but they know someone else that's going to fit that. So I think being specific about the job responsibilities and the characteristics that you're looking for. And then the other one is I personally don't put an income range when I'm looking for or putting a search out there. And I don't, because I want someone to respond to the position, not, okay, I'm making this and they're paying this and I'm going to go for that. I'm really looking for that person to be honest with me as well, from the standpoint that if I don't have an income range and I ask what income range they're looking for, they're going to give me their number versus the number that I put in the ad. That's just something else I do. And then I set a budget, especially with Indeed. But there's a budget of, you know, how much you are willing to pay on a monthly basis to get resumes. And I've done anything from $50 to I think over $300, and I've never seen a difference personally. So I don't know that the budget needs to be that high. It's supposedly getting you greater, better candidates. I haven't seen that personally. So those are my key things about finding a candidate.
Okay. Those are good. Those are very valuable pointers. Um, it's funny how some of this stuff is, you can kind of boil it down into some really key primary things that drive the results. And that's
Correct.
one of those. This is one of
Small
those.
things make a big
Yeah.
difference in results.
All right. So once you've got the ad out there and you get the candidates and the resumes start coming in, what's the best way to review resumes and pick the people that you want to?
That's a great question.
Going?
So first, again, I'm going to share what I do and what I recommend in the Hiring Advantage book is that you wait a week, like let the resumes fly in, because there's going to be a lot of them. Well, we hope there's going to be a lot of them. In today's world, we're not getting an overflow of resumes, but I like to have them come in, and then on a Friday, I or someone else on the team is going through them, and you just delete those that are not applicable at all to the position that you're looking for. And then the rest might be maybes and yeses, meaning the yeses are the ones that you want to call first and foremost. So I think if you wait a week, delete, and then you've got your like 2 stacks, and then this is what I think is another core step. Instead of just scheduling interviews with those individuals, it's scheduling a pre-screening interview, or you just call them and you do the pre-screening on the phone. Because why waste our time face to face if they don't sound good? Like some of the questions that I'll throw in and share with you, like I usually start, why are you looking to make a change? And I like that question because sadly, there are people out there that say, I'm always looking. Okay, that's not somebody that I want on my team, right? But if somebody says the company, the door's closed, I moved to Minnesota, whatever they say, at least I have some framework. Or they might say, I didn't get along with people in my office. So again, red flags can come up. Then the second question is, describe to me what you do throughout the day or what you did throughout the day. And I like to ask that question to give me the viewpoint of what did they really do? Because a resume usually has all kinds of beautiful sentences of the things they do, but tell me day to day what you really do. Like if they say, well, I manage and schedule everything for Brandon, I do all of his travel, whatever, like I can see that they're doing a variety of things versus just I answer the phone and greet clients, and you want somebody to be your right arm person. Well, that's not really going to match up. The third question is when I ask about income range. Tell me what income range you're looking for. They give me that number and they say, then my next question is, what are you making now? So that helps me in my salary range of what I'm looking to pay. And again, if I'm at 40 and someone's at 140, I'm going to end the interview right there. Like it's not the range that we're looking to bring somebody in at. But if somebody's at 65, then I'm going to just keep on going because I'm not going to look like that's out of the park for me. I just want to know more about that person's capabilities. I ask about strengths and weaknesses. And in the book, all these questions are in there. But the strengths and weaknesses and what's most important to them in their next position, another crucial question. Some people it is salary, it is teamwork, it is health insurance benefits. Like everybody's got something different. And the more that you understand what's important to them, the easier it is to figure out if they're a right fit for you. So when I'm doing those pre-screenings, sometimes they'll last 3 minutes. It's just not a right fit. I might not even like the way they sound on the phone. Or I might spend 15, 20 minutes. And if I like them in asking my pre-screening questions, then I'll bring them in for a face-to-face interview.
Okay.
So to me, that's like the second step after. And then the third step is the face-to-face interview.
And, from a numbers viewpoint, is there an ideal number of candidates that make that face-to-face? Like if you had all the candidates that you wanted to have, what's an ideal number of, okay, if I can find 5 or maybe it's 10 interviews, like what do you suggest?
So back in the day when I was doing a lot of interviewing, my goal was that I could talk to 10 to 15 to pre-screen. And out of that 10 to 15, narrow it down to 5 or 6 that would come in for a face-to-face interview. And out of that 5 to 6, after interviewing them by the team and or testing them, again, there's so many different things that you can test out there. We use Colby. But after doing that, and it could be spelling, grammar, like there's, depending on what the position is. And then when they do that, if you like them, let's say 6 come in, you might only have 3 come back for a second interview, or that's when they meet you. And it might be before you have that second interview, you're checking their references to learn as much as you can from their past employers.
Okay. Now that's a good idea process there.
And I'm such a firm believer of checking references. A lot of people will say you're not going to get much information, but when I've been checking references for my own company, and if somebody says, we don't give out that information, that's somewhat of a red flag for me. So then I'll say, look, I'm a small business owner and I really need your help. Is this somebody that you would want to hire again? So either the floodgates open and they're like, you know what, Gina, this person's great, blah, blah, blah. We just can't really tell you much. Or they say, I don't want to answer any questions. Again, that's just telling me something right there.
Yeah. 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 Because people are cautious about those sorts of conversations nowadays.
Correct.
So once you've identified that candidate or candidates, what about the next step of presenting the offer? Like, how do you suggest people do that?
So first, after that first face-to-face interview and whatever kind of testing you want to incorporate, I like to have a second, again, after checking references, and or in that second, they might even have a shadow day, just to, not so much exactly the position that they're doing, but get a feel for the environment, how people work and communicate and how things pass back and forth throughout the day. And then when you're making an offer based on all that was discussed, you've got to itemize everything. The base, if there's bonus, the PTO, like their time off, their benefits, 401k, whatever you have. And I usually like to get it out by email first so that they can just process it, but then schedule a call to go over it with them and let them ask questions. And I always say to people, when you're in that offer phone call, be prepared for a counter offer. Like, again, I might think I was going to pay 40. I'm offering 48. They're more at 52, 53, but for whatever reason, I chose 48. And that's what I put in my offer. And then they come back and they're like, well, I'd really like to be making 55, which was never in the equation. But the core thing is just, this is how you're also getting to know this individual. What they say to you is what you believe. And if that changes, what is that going to be like when they're working with you? So making the offer by email, having a follow-up phone call, talking through everything, and then you formulate the start date. Are they working? Do they need to give notice? What's the best time that you're prepared to have them come on board?
Okay. Now that's, yeah, I like the shadowing idea. Have you ever had?
It's just seeing the environment first and foremost. But because we have a lot of schedulers on my team, I'll use one example. I will have, if they're going to be hired for that position, I will have them sit in and listen to one of, we call it relationship managers, not scheduler, but to listen to one of the relationship managers in what they're doing on the phone. Because some people are going to get scared away and they're going to be, that's not what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And I'd rather that happen now versus 3 weeks or 3 months down the road.
Right.
So a shadow day can be seeing the environment, but it also could be, they're replacing Gina in the position and they're just watching what Gina does throughout the day. It might not be very specific, but it's just getting a feel or flavor of the day.
Right. Have you ever had people shadow and you've decided, oh, this is not going to culturally work?
A team member has more so like batteries weren't included.
Yeah.
Because you see a different side of a person. Everybody's on their best behavior when they're going through the interviewing process. but the testing or Colby or shadowing might show a different type of individual.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, it's just the more you know. And gosh, making a bad hire is the worst. Like it just feels so bad for the business owner.
Right, it does. And that kind of takes me into, you make the offer, they say yes, you decide on a start date. I think the next thing that the team, the company needs to do is lay out the training. Again, going back to accountability, we want them to be accountable to what we want them to do, but I think it really is up to us to build that training. And we have at least, regardless of what our positions are, it's a 2-week internal training program. They're involved with me, other people on the team. It could be that they're watching videos, listening to audios. It really brings their position together, but it is laid out like every half hour. Some things are an hour, but they're getting a dose. And kind of going back to the shadowing, they're first and foremost shadowing someone, watching what they're doing, and then that person shadows the new person, watching them do what they're supposed to be doing to help them, and then they take it over. Then it's theirs.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, the onboarding, it's I find, me personally, I find the onboarding is the hardest part because you're so busy. Sometimes it's just the day just takes over and there is no structure to that onboarding and you're just kind of throwing them in the water. And
so that's something really important that you just said is we're busy, right? So if I start on Monday and everyone is running around, I'm going to become a cost, because there's no way I can learn my position and basically earn what I'm getting paid out, right?
Right.
So the schedule that we have, anyone that's involved with that person has it on their schedule as well. So it's not just when Gina has time, she's going to sit and go over this with you. It's like Gina's doing that on Monday at 3 or Thursday at 10. So not only is their training outlined in a schedule, everyone that's involved with them has it on their schedule. So regardless of how busy we are, and again, most people are thrown into a position, which sometimes I think is the best way for them to get involved. But if it's not laid out, they're not going to get there. So it doesn't matter about expectations or accountability.
You've got to set them up for success. I mean,
correct.
So yeah, sometimes that's easier said than done. And it requires some front end planning. You got to really think through these things and plan and schedule and coordinate. And it takes some work, right?
It does. It does take work. However, think about this. When you are bringing on a new client, how much time do you take to nurture that, to become a new client, and then maintain that?
Yeah.
So we have to do the same thing with people on board who are going to be working with our clients.
Yeah. Well, when we help firms transition from seller to buyer, and often the buyers, they want to come in to the new practice and focus just on clients. And we have to say, wait, hold on. The first area of focus needs to be on the team. Like right. You need to develop those relationships and get everyone aligned with what's going on and get them comfortable.
The big picture.
Yeah. And then you can focus on those client relationships. So just an interesting carryover.
Yes.
So, well, that's great. I mean, you've clearly thought about this over many, many years, and you've got this nice process, and I can attest because I personally have worked with you. You've helped me with a hire, and I was so grateful to have that sort of high level guidance.
Well, and I think the key thing for you was just thinking about it in a different way, going about it in a different way, because again, it's not our unique ability to really go through what that process is. most times looks good, sounds good. Let's just go with it. What's the worst that can happen? We're just going to have to find somebody else. But that goes back to what you said earlier. Turnover is costly.
It's so costly, especially if there's a lot of training for that position.
Correct. And turnover starts with not being clear, not having expectations, accountability, training, still being accountable, and clear expectations. Because I think the other thing is most business owners tend to not say what they really think, what they feel, what they want. And the two things that I always say when we bring somebody new on the team is, first of all, I'm like Roadrunner. I come in, I swirl around, I create a mess, and then I leave. And the second thing is I want them to think beyond doing, because we can do what we need to do all day long. But if you're thinking beyond doing, then you're adding value to the company.
Ooh, I
and
like
then
that.
The third thing that I say is I'm very direct. Like I really say what I think, feel, need. I'll explain why. I never yell at anyone, but I'll come in, and whenever I'm talking with somebody about something that might not be working, I'll say, we need to look at this differently. How should we go about doing it? It's not like you're not doing this, and therefore, how are you going to fix it? Because the second I use that you or I, then if we're not on a team together, right?
Yeah. Yeah. As soon as you start accusing, that something trips in the brain, right? Get into defensive mode, and
right.
Yeah, which that kind of brings us all into managing, which is a whole nother topic, right? That's
it is. But one thing I will say is when I say state what you need, what you want, why you need it, even going back to if they're a buyer, like, and they're going to meet the team, it's like giving them the big picture of what they see versus somebody's taking over and what does that mean for me type thing.
Right.
Because the more that they see the big picture, the more they're engaged. And if they really become resourceful versus look at me as the resource, they're going to be valuable to the company. Yeah. But I also am a very, very firm believer of performance reviews. So 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, regardless of the accountability, it's more like a communication evaluation versus just performance. But when you're doing it 30, 60, 90 days, things can't get too out of whack because you're still having to touch base point about them, their position, even what I need to do differently to help them be more successful. And then it could be 60 days and 6 months, and then I go to yearly. But I'm telling you, there's been times in that first 30-day, like here are the areas that we need to get cleaned up. And if it doesn't happen, if I'm driving to my office, which is 5 minutes away, on my third time that I'm thinking about somebody on my team that I don't really feel that they're living up to where they should be at this point, it's like I have to exit. I have to exit that person because it's just going to continue to be a drain on me, the rest of the team, and therefore the company. So cutting bait, like a lot of times people will say, I'm not going to let them go. Like they're really good at answering the phone, but they're terrible at making my appointments. Okay, well, they should be good on answering the phone. Anybody can do that. But if their main job is to make your appointments, that's what they really have to be graded upon, if you will.
Right. Yeah, it's and it's hard to let people go. So if sometimes you hire somebody that's not right and you don't do that, then you're just going to suffer. And that's anybody who's been through that.
That money that you're, again, let's say that I was originally thinking 40, I paid 65. They're not doing their job. That's actually costing me another $15,000, $20,000 because I or someone else is doing their work.
Yeah.
So cutting it off and someone else is doing their work, it doesn't matter. Yes, you have to say goodbye, but if they're not doing the job, that goes back to accountability. If they're not doing the job, then they can't be in the position.
Right. Yeah. I always think of it too as like, they're kind of making those decisions on their own. Like if you're setting up the expectations, if you're making clear what you want from them and what they're expected to do, then if they don't do that, then they should know they're not going to go on. Right.
Correct. Exactly.
Well, this has been awesome information. I know our audience is getting a tremendous value from all this. And so I want to kind of wrap up, and I've got a few sort of like quick closing questions. One, I'm going to hit you up with a book recommendation. Any books that you've read, or let me expand that. Any new tools that you've discovered lately that are really cool that you want to share?
So one book, it's an old book. It's called Whale Done, WHALE. But it's basically how they train whales when they can't communicate. Like you can talk to a whale, but how does the whale communicate back to you? So it's just, it's a quick read by Ken Blanchard, and I think it's incredibly valuable. And someone that really needs the right person, Dan Sullivan's new version of Who Not How with Ben Hardy.
Yeah.
Priceless. That is a priceless book.
Yeah, I'm in the midst of listening to that on audiobook. It's a great one.
Okay. And then the other one is The Energy Bus. And it's great for either a manager of the firm, it could be the owner of the firm, but it's just taking a different perspective from being that manager or that owner and how people are perceiving you. So I just think it's another quick, but like that, all those books just gave me goosebumps because they're very practical and easy. And most importantly, it just gets you thinking differently.
Yeah.
And that's what a business book needs to be.
Yeah. All this is not really all that complicated. It's just stuff we kind of know we need to do, and we just need to do it sometimes.
Correct.
Well, what's one idea, observation, insight that you've learned from your work that you consider to be like the major contributor to the success of your clients?
I think communication.
Yeah.
Seeing progress, like really sharing progress. Like you brought up your team meeting every week. Ours is every other week. And I always start with a question. And it's just a random question. It could be on anything. But what that does is it shares a little bit about each person, how they think about something. And we're doing our meetings on Zoom. And I had them put the answer to the question in chat directly to me. But then when everybody's done, then I had them all go around. And I do that, to me, first and foremost, because I don't want somebody to say something and then another person like dovetails off of what was just being said. And then the second thing that I do is I share our accomplishments over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I feel like they just need to know, and some of those things pertain to them and some don't. But I just like them to know because that's part of the company. And then not all the time, but when I end our meetings, I will sometimes have a 5-minute, it could be a motivational video, or it could be something relating to language or dealing with no's. But I really look for, it could be a TED Talks, it could be a quote, but I try to find something to end the meeting that's not just, about me, the company, them. It is really about thinking outside of who we are, what we do, and why we do it.
I like that. Yeah, it kind of changes the energy of the meeting a lot too, doesn't it?
It does. And like you said, I have some people in my office, and then I have 3 people that are virtual across the country. And I want everyone to feel connected, even though we're not in the same place.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I watched this podcast, and I can't remember who it was, but it was a guy who sold his company, and he grew the company really fast. He had this awesome team, and they used to share their fails. So he would have team members submit like their biggest failure, and then they would just laugh about it, like to kind of make failure. Yeah. Make failure. It's okay to fail. It's your people are going to make mistakes. I thought that was a cool thing.
Yeah, and you can definitely learn from your failures. And if you're sharing that, and then other people will be like, oh my gosh, that happened to me, and let me tell you what I did. So you can also get some good brainstorming out of it.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to what you're saying about being candid. I think you can create a culture for candid conversation. And and it doesn't have to be tough. I mean, it's just matter of fact, right? It's just that culture is really helpful.
Well, I'm going to share, I'm working on a new product, and my goal was that it was going to be done by January of this year. Here we are in May, and I may be at 50%. So it's one of the things I put in there, just so you know, I haven't done my job at moving that product forward. Like I'm going to be vulnerable, candid, whatever word you want to use, because then I'm real to them. And then therefore they can be more real with me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. What's the best way for people to follow, connect with you, find out about what you offer?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Gina Pellegrini, and then my office number is 952-829-5300, or my email is Gina@Pellegrini, which I'm sure when you put this out there, they'll have the spelling of my last name.
Yeah.
But it's Pellegrini Team, TEAM.com.
Awesome.
And if anyone ever has any questions, they can just shoot me an email, and I'll help them in any way I can in answering that for them, especially relating to some of the hiring process that we talked about today.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you need a quick, short, easy book to read about hiring, go buy The Hiring Advantage by Gina Pellegrini. It's an amazingly good tool to have.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Accountant's Flight Plan podcast. If you like what you heard today, please follow us so that you can get updates when new episodes are released, and share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. You can also follow Poe Group Advisors on social media. Please visit our website for more information at poegroupadvisors.com.